So this is pretty amazing. Representative Justin Jones, right after he got sworn in, told MSNBC that he plans on holding the Tennessee State House Speaker accountable. He must resign for his attacks on democracy. What we saw on Thursday was an attempt to crucify democracy. That's what Representative Jones told MSNBC right after he got sworn in. Pretty remarkable. Justin Jones is not going to go down without a fight. This is so much more than just bringing back Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. This is about holding people accountable, and they're not going to go down without a fight. And Republicans, you should be terrified. This is amazing news. We just saw the Nashville City Council reinstate Justin Jones into a newly elected position as state representative by a unanimous vote. Republicans tried messing around last week, but we will never forget what they tried doing. They got rid of him because of this color of his skin and also his age. This is a great win for democracy and really good news. Thank goodness.
It's really refreshing to see these young people, young men, on the side of democracy. That was Victor Shee, and he's also he's not a representative, but he worked with the Biden campaign. So they are motivated and activated.
Okay, so one of the points that I'm always raising on this show is that this version of conservatism, what we call conservatism, is actually a form of fascism. And yet another way we can see it as what it actually is fascism, is that a key characteristic is that it has to be so pathological, it can't help but be hypocritical, right? So we should always expect to see hypocrisy, right? Because it's morally compromised. Again, we are not talking about the content of what they did to silence him, because that goes without saying. They themselves won't even make an argument. It's a procedural thing. Oh, he spoke at a turn, as if that's ever been a reason to exclude someone.
Right.
We know that this was politically motivated. That's not debatable. But here's where the hypocrisy comes in. They will say that, oh, these 34 indictments against Trump, it's politically motivated. But all of a sudden, when it comes to them, it was a procedural thing. It was code 34-12B of subsection C, Roman numeral 2, 4, and 3. You see what I'm saying? It's some obscure procedural thing that they're going to cite. Then you've got these 34 felony indictments, okay, that are constitutional in nature, okay, that are criminal, that come out of the criminal code. But, that's politically motivated, so we should ignore it. It's just a witch hunt on Donald Trump. But when it comes to silencing these young black men for being uppity, remember, we need to understand the irateness of which that guy Turner from Sevierville, the outrage he felt. Because in the past, young black men like them were simply lynched. They were deaded. They were unalived. Game over. In silence. Remember,
they wanted to bring that back.
Falls in the forest, okay? When a tree falls in the forest, if no one hears, it doesn't make a sound. It doesn't. Countless generations of black men were disappeared out of history and existence for learning to read, for speaking out of turn, for advocating for themselves. Okay, so for these white men in Tennessee to see a young, articulate black man, their heads explode. Okay, so that's the context we need to understand this in.
And that was one of the reasons why I was so enraged when I heard that Kumar, the immigrant, when I heard him, the way he was talking to them, to the Justins, and he was being patronizing, condescending, talking down, being
like I said, he comes from generations of people who applauded the colonization and destruction of their own people and country for centuries by the British.
But the thing about it is, he's over here now, and the fact that
I understand,
acting that way.
This is not that big of a deal compared to the fact that he welcomed the colonization of his own land and people in favor of Brits. Okay, and he identifies with the colonizer. So for him to identify with KKK people, it's not that big of a jump. If anything, it's really not that serious, considering the colonization that happened. Remember, the sovereignty with which the Crown of England had over India was not a common basic thing. The full title of Elizabeth was Queen of England and Scotland, Great Britain, and the Empress of India. That was part of her official title. It wasn't just your common colony like in the Caribbean or something. India was a part of the unified crown of England. I mean, it was the level of colonization there was not your kind of common ordinary imperialism. They fully incorporated it, which is why people like Kumar's ancestors identified with the English, not with their own people. So for him to come to America and say, oh, these good white people are just trying to do the good right thing, it's not that big of a jump.
Well, for him, it's not a big deal, but for me, I'm going to keep saying it. I take offense to that. And plus, people like him are dangerous to people like me, considering what black people went through in the 60s to give him the right to come over here with that nonsense.
Yeah, but again, the point is that it's naive and deliberately ignorant to somehow understand this outside of the context of generations of lynchings. Young black articulate men were not allowed to exist. They were annihilated and blotted from history 100% of the time.
Yep. Yep. That makes it even
It
worse.
was
just
not
thinking about that.
tolerated even a little bit. And if you doubt me, you've got to see that film, 12 Years a Slave. The sheer level of terrorism, and I use that word specifically in its technical sense. If you
Well,
look at
no,
the main character,
I don't doubt you at all. That's why it's
no,
extra enraging to me.
I'm speaking to your audience, to the people
Okay.
listening. Is that you've got to see? I think it should be required watching for all students of America. Of course, it had to be a British guy that made this film. But 12 Years a Slave is a film adaptation of a guy's journals of what happened. He was kidnapped, forced into slavery, a free man, never had been a slave, was always a free man. And he was kidnapped and forced into slavery. This is a result of the Fugitive Slave Act, by the way. I can go into that history as well if you want, but it's all the product of the Missouri Compromise of 1850, and became a federal duty to catch fugitive slaves in the northern states. And so a bunch of bounty hunters just went around kidnapping random black people and forcing them to take the name of an escaped slave. And I can verify. What's interesting is that his story. I knew about his account. We had learned that it existed, but I never learned any specifics about his account. So watching the movie was nice for me. But every detail and characteristic that he showed about, for example, the range of plantations he was on, he had the whole range. I mean, these Southerners say, "Oh, not all slave owners were terrible." It's true. Some slave owners were completely decent people. That's not the point, though. By the way, but he had good slave masters and awful ones. Okay, but he ran the whole gambit, and his abduction. Again, that really actually happened. So I can confirm every detail in that book tracks exactly with what I understand about actual aspects of what we understand through history of being the slave trade. So there's nothing fantastical, exaggerated, or odd or unusual. It tracks exactly with a common thing. And that little jail that he was held in Washington, D.C., people need to know. That building is still there. It's right across the street from the fucking White House, just like they depicted. It's true. This is not an exaggeration.
Well,
So
I also
anyway,
like
I'm going on a rant, but what I'm saying is that this is we need to understand how long it was that black man that he wouldn't let on that he knew how to read. Remember how
Right.
He was terrified to let people know that he knew how to read because you would have been executed right away. And the reason why I say that's a big deal is because while whippings were in fact very common, outright murdering your slave wasn't, because slaves were an enormous investment. We're talking, it was tens of thousands of dollars. In other words, to them, it was the equivalent of a major piece of machinery, right? Like you wouldn't just scrap, You wouldn't scrap a tractor because it blew a piston. You'd work with it. You'd
that
keep it
goes
going.
along with the conversation of reparations, because I also like to remind people that Wall Street, the existing Wall Street, that when we could talk about reparations, what it looks like, Wall Street built their wealth off of the sale of my ancestors.
Okay.
And
Yeah, not only was it, it's true that in fact, you can look it up. They did some research and they found, for example, it doesn't exist anymore because after 2008, Washington Mutual got bought up. But remember that Washington Mutual was tracked as having made its initial wealth through the slave trade. But we know that, again, we know that already. But here's another fact. How about the fact that Wall Street is where it started off as an auction platform for slaves?
Yep.
This is also true. The reason why it's called Wall Street is because there was an actual wall. Why was there a wall? It was to keep the indigenous people out. So prior to it being a slave auction site, it was also the site of an Indian massacre.
Yep.
By Christians, by Protestant Christians who skinned them alive and wore their skin as chaps. Okay, this is what happened. This is the brutality of your so-called founding fathers that you like to ride their cocks. You're an embarrassment because you sit there and have this bullshit Federalist Society. What would the founding fathers think? You ride their cock, you idealize them, and you're just showing how gay you are. That you're late homosexuals anyway. And you can't stand it.
Just like the Bible, it's totally misinterpreted. And speaking of which this is our other topic, we're coming to Mr. I'm black, but I have Nazi billionaire friends that bought my seat.
Clarence Thomas, House Negro extraordinaire. Yeah.
Oh my God. So this is like part 2 of our discussion from the other night, which we'll finish it up tonight. But this is from the Intercept. I'm going to start us off here. This is from the Intercept. Is that the Intercept? Yeah, I believe. No. Yeah. ProPublica. Clarence Thomas and the Billionaire. Okay, the Billionaire being, which I argue, Harlan Crow is our actual SCOTUS. Because he bought in Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, Clarence Thomas is bought and paid for, sure.
Yeah, he's the seat warmer. So Harlan Crow.
And I would argue that what people, I don't think people realize is that he was groomed from the beginning.
Oh yeah.
This is why I'm surprised that it's taken this many decades. Because my understanding is that from the beginning, he was always, if you look at his voting record, before all those other idiot assholes got in there, he was the original prop guy. He was the original just tell me how to vote guy. Because, for example, you look at Kennedy. believe it or not, Justice Kennedy was actually put in there by Nixon. He was supposed to be a conservative, but his voting record is actually very liberal. So back then in the Nixon years, conservative didn't mean you were theological. Okay, it wasn't about towing the party line. It was about you had certain values in common, but you judged things according to their merits. So as a result, Kennedy votes like a liberal, even though he's technically a conservative. Clarence Thomas is that new breed. He's that new version where you're just a party loyalist. You tout the party line, you vote along the lines, and you dare not think by yourself. Does that sound familiar?
Well,
It's that house Negro.
hold that thought because I want to play. This goes into what you're saying, and we're going to discuss on the other side of this video. But this guy here, he's basically giving a summary of the grooming, and it's a short video summary of the grooming of Clarence Thomas.
Because he's trying to settle a score with himself. He suffered profound alienation, real or perceived. But to go to an actual professional for it, to get therapy, would be a sign of failure. It would mean he was a P-word bitch boy, right? He can't have that. He cannot honestly grapple with his past. Let me get into it. He was born into profound poverty, but absolutely does not trust his parents because his father abandoned him for another family, promised him things, never delivered, never came to his wedding. His mom had to work and so gave him to the grandfather. So his parents didn't want him. His grandfather tried to refuse him. His grandfather had made it out of poverty through brutal self-discipline to the point where, for all outwards appearances, he was donating to the NAACP and a strong member of the community, but virtually ignored Clarence, beat him when he wasn't ignoring him, stripped the heater out of the company car that Clarence was working out of to toughen him up, was just an absolute asshole. However, his grandfather paid for his education through private Catholic school, was hoping he'd graduate from seminary, but Clarence dropped out, and his grandfather was so angry he didn't attend any graduation of Clarence's going forward and never involved himself again with Clarence's life. Clarence immersed himself in the NAACP, but he thought that they were full of middle-class black people who didn't know what getting born into poverty was like and looked down on him for how dark his skin was and his accent, that they were colorists just like everyone else. He tried to dabble with black nationalism at some point in time, like some toxic hotep shit, even like audibly, publicly mocking interracial relationships. But at some point he realizes that he just doesn't want to have any part of it. And he actively tries to pursue jobs and positions that have nothing to do with racial issues at all. He thought that the poor black community was trying to drag him back into the trap, kind of like some rich rappers feel. He felt like the rich northerners were racist, but, covered that up with a smile. He felt like the colleges that accepted him only did so because of a quota, didn't really want him in the first place. And he felt like he never had the connection, so he couldn't get a job at some of the law firms that he wanted to get a job at. He learned out very quickly and cynically that if he said the right shit in public, he could hitch his wagon to Reagan Republicans and rich white people, go far with his career. His goal was an alcoholic, a porn addict. His politics started to diverge from his first wife, and he cheated on her, so she tried to divorce him, and he felt betrayed, like a woman with agency, what the fuck? So he sets a goal for himself, to achieve the highest court in the land, to get over that low self-esteem. But even then, on the precipice of achieving that, they march out Anita Hill, a woman that he keeps talking about porn with, who rejected him. So he feels betrayed by them. And then he feels like he's only been chosen because he's a black man replacing Thurgood Marshall, right? So even then, he can't achieve it. So of course, this explains some of the animosity he has towards John Roberts in the Chief Justice position. That's the only thing left for him.
Yeah, that explains a lot. That he's a pathetic, weak man who is driven by insecurity. He reminds me a lot of. It's funny, a lot of these guys out here talk about beta males and this and that, right? Which is not something I ever got involved in. But those guys, he's literally OG incel before there were incels.
Yeah, a passport bro.
That's how pathetic he is, and I'm sure he's a porn addict because of the whole Anita Hill thing. I mean, we were young then, but I remember the whole Anita Hill thing.
I remember it too.
And
My mom
because
watched
it was
it every
very,
night.
yeah, I as a kid, well, you couldn't get away from it back then. I don't know if you remember. I mean, it was everywhere. But but the lewdness, the details, and I don't know if you remember, but Arlen Specter, years later, he apologized for how he treated Anita Hill. But you'll remember, even these were the good conservatives like Arlen Specter was just like, how dare you, Anita Hill, come up here and make up this shit about this good man? This is somebody who should, in today's age, we would never treat Anita Hill the way that we do today. He was the OG Me Too movement. Okay, we knew this guy was a creep, but he's so brazen. Remember, I told you conservatives will never step down. They're just so scandalous. They're so morally bankrupt. But one thing they can count on is that two things. They have a double backup. Their constituency will never abandon them because one, they're immune to facts, and number two, they're as morally bankrupt or more than they are.
They don't care as long as they hold power.
They don't know, and if they did, they wouldn't care.
Yep, they do not care.
See,
because they think the power that they hold is going to protect them.
Right. So they don't know, they don't want to know, and if they were confronted, they would just go into denial and dismissal. Okay. This is what I mean by morally bankrupt and cowardly. These are the requirements for fascism. Take a look at the Nazis. Were the Nazis strong? Did anyone think the Nazis were strong? No. Okay. Their 1,000-year reign lasted for a couple. Okay, they're pathetic, just like the Confederacy. Were they strong? No, they're a bunch of losers. Okay, so these bullshit hyper nationalist narratives about how strong our heroes are is a fraud. But the problem is these people who hold up these idealized fantasies of the past, okay, are themselves, once again, don't know the facts, don't want to know the facts, and when confronted with them, dismiss, deny, and diminish. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
This painting, I don't know if you can see it. I can't pull, but I'll put the link in the description so everybody can go back.
Yeah, we talked about it with the creepy Native American in the back.
Yeah,
And I just want to remind you that, so we didn't talk about this last time, but this notion of the Native American is actually very important symbolism. Why? It's important to understand that the American empire has always incorporated those things that they look up to that are strong. And as a result, us naming, for example, people are like, why can't we be the Atlanta Braves and the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And all these, these Native American symbols and mascots.
Right.
Which no matter how much Native American, like pretty much 100% of Native Americans hate it. Okay, they're like, we're a people, we're a proud people, we're a brave people, we're not a fucking mascot. But they just don't care. You have to understand why. It's because for generations, Americans would incorporate and ultimately co-opt. So there's that word co-optation. It's to take something that opposes you and take it over and take it as your own. Okay, it's like a form of colonization. Okay,
yep.
Americans have for generations co-opted the strength of the Native Americans. Okay, so you remember the wildly successful and basically war criminal Sherman, General Sherman's march to the sea in the Civil War. William Sherman. He just cut a path of destruction from where he was just straight to the ocean. He just destroyed everything in sight and absolutely crushed the economy of and the infrastructure of the South. And it took him about a century to recover. It took him about until the 1960s to recover from William Sherman's march to the sea. Remember, his name was William T. Sherman. William Tecumseh Sherman. His middle name was a famous Native American war chief, Tecumseh. Okay, it was common for generations of white Americans to name their children with famous Native American war chiefs who fought against the U.S. and successfully so. Right? Again, they adopt their strength from Native Americans. You've heard of the correct political machinery we learned in our high school textbooks, Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall, the Tammany Hall, Boss Tweed and the Tammany Hall, the Democratic correct machinery where they used to get 125% voter turnout. Vote early, vote often. Dead people voted. Remember, whenever someone died, they write their name down, and then they'd hand this, and people would go in line and go back to the back, and they would just keep voting for dead people. So they would get incredible turnout. Right? This was the corrupt machinery. Tammany Hall. If you look at the beginning, the opening scene of Martin Scorsese's film Gangs of New York, you'll see that there's a statue of an Indian. That Indian statue is Tamanand. It was Tamanand Hall. They met in a building. Boss Tweed met in a building called Tamanand Hall. And so as a nickname, it became called Tammany Hall because people couldn't understand that. But again, these Native American war chiefs were loved, were beloved. Okay, so whenever you see this kind of co-opted Native American symbol, it's a sign of something very deeply, deeply embedded in American imperialist culture that has been erased for several generations. So we don't see the significance of it. But it's hard for us to see how important that symbolism for the blue-blooded of America, because they have that legacy of where their middle names of their great-grandfathers were Native American. See, you and I, we don't know about these kinds of connections, but these are deep, deep connections. It is not an accident that they're dressed casually in shorts, but prominently in the middle is an incorrectly sized Native American statue so that it would fit in there. Because apparently the painter said that statue was twice as big as that, but he shrunk it down so that it would fit in frame.
I would even go further that is also a symbol of a conqueror mindset.
Well, that's what I mean.
They're sitting there like, oh, we conquered.
Yeah, this is a symbol. Yeah, that's what I mean. That after they conquer an enemy, they get to incorporate it, right? So so there's this famous quote: in the animal world, it's eat or be eaten. In the human world, it's name or be named. Okay, so when you get to do the naming, okay, when you get to name your social meeting circle where the elite 1% of 1%, so 0.0001%, make all the decisions, which Noam Chomsky calls the planner class. Okay, this is not just the upper class. This is not just the mega billionaire class. This is the planner class, the people whose decisions become enacted into policy and get inscribed into history. Here. Right. Yeah. Okay. This is the planner class. This is something I always tell people. The people that are all dressed up are nouveau riche. The jerk off with the Hawaiian shirt, the flip flops, and the shorts is a millionaire. Is the true planner. And you know how to really identify. You know how to really identify the planner class. They're the only ones without phones because they have someone that handles their phone for them.
Yep.
Okay. You don't know what we're talking about right now. You think you know, but you don't know how far beyond these people are from what your audience thinks is just normative for our day and age. Okay, these men are not like you and me. They are nothing like you and me.
And they have used their wealth to condition people to think that they are deserve that the position that they're in.
Yeah, it's entitlement. But the thing is, they don't have to do much conditioning. We're already deeply conditioned in it. They just have to ride on the backs of what their ancestors bought with our blood. So, you know, and it's like, well, you're an immigrant to this country. Why are you saying it was bought with your blood? You know, my people, I exist because my people survive annihilation.
Right. And who did it? Who did it?
Well, the United States. Okay.
There you go.
They dropped more bombs on North Korea than in the entire Pacific theater of World War II combined. On a tiny little country, they deliberately bombed dams and watched the water sweep entire communities away. Okay, that's by definition a war crime. Okay, they bombed North Korea back into the Stone Age. They had this event where Curtis LeMay, if you've seen Dr. Strangelove, George C. Scott's famous award-winning performance of the crazy Air Force general is based on Curtis LeMay.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Curtis LeMay was this sociopath or psychopath, serial mass murderer. He called an emergency meeting in the Oval Office, and he met with President Eisenhower, who was the former Allied Supreme Commander in World War II, and he said, "We have an emergency," and it was called the North Korean bombing crisis, right? He said, "We ran out of targets in North Korea. There's not a tree, telephone pole, or rubble to bomb left. It's flat." He later bragged, "We bombed their cities to dust, and then we bombed the dust into powder." Okay? And the rumor has it that after Curtis LeMay left that meeting, that Eisenhower cried. And it's the only known instance of a president crying in the Oval Office. This is a supreme commander of World War II, a man who other ego-minded generals followed. Okay? People like that idiot Montgomery from England. I mean, this guy was a fuck up and a retard. Okay, he couldn't do anything right, and he was an egomaniac, but he followed Eisenhower's orders and his strategies. Okay, Normandy worked because Eisenhower had fucking balls. Okay, and he planned the largest sea invasion ever in history. They literally made artificial docks and floated them over. No one thought this was possible. This was an undertaking that was of just such an undertaking. It's incredible. We have a freeway system because of Eisenhower. Eisenhower witnessed the Nazi Autobahn. And they were able to ship troops back and forth, truck them back and forth. And he was so impressed, he created the Interstate Highway Act. Back then, it was called the War and Interstate Transportation Act. It was primarily, he got it passed saying, we need to be able to get troops from one coast to the other. That's why the 10 and the 5, they go from one coast to the other. Okay, clean through, from Mexico to Canada, straight through, without any stops and traffic lights, right? This is the interstate system. This is something that Eisenhower did, one of our most underrated presidents, right? That's why when people say today's Democrats are to the right of Eisenhower Republicans. Eisenhower said the New Deal is part of law. Anyone who opposes it is a fucking sociopath. And now you've got all these Democrats that are willing to conspire with other Republicans to get rid of it. The Clintons succeeded. 4 out of 5 things that Republicans, when I talk to Republicans, I love to fuck their stupid little pea brains up. I say, oh, you know why conservatives hate Clinton so much? And their eyes get huge. They're like, ooh, this guy's smart. I'm going to get a great little tidbit. And I'll say, because he's the most successful Republican president we've ever had. And you just see their face drop. Because he got rid of welfare reform, the crime bill, right? Glass-Steagall. I mean, he succeeded in getting the entire Republican platform passed. Guess what? The final thing in Newt Gingrich, in his autobiography, admitted that he was in secret talks with Clinton to privatize Social Security. And the day before they were going to announce it, Monica Lewinsky hit. If you don't believe me, Google.
Oh, I remember. Oh, and that was another one.
Google. Did Monica Lewinsky save Social Security? Go ahead and Google it.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that was another one, too. And all the Tory details they had. It was like in the newspaper, because back then people read newspapers. And I remember getting the Sunday paper, and I was reading up on that because my mom was watching that, too. And I couldn't even read the paper because I was a teenager. But it was like soft porn because of all the details they put in the newspaper.
Right.
I mean, it was.
And otherwise, he would have succeeded in getting rid of Social Security. Okay, so when we talk about, that's why I'm tired of liberals talking about Democrat this, Democrat that. What, like they're like, remember the good old days under Clinton? And I say, no, I don't remember those. I just remember a Republican with a D on his chest.
Right.
Okay, but he was the most successful Republican president we had. I don't know what else you mean. You mean
Yeah,
Obama?
I mean, I brought that up
you mean
too before
Obama,
people.
who quadrupled the number of wars that Bush got us into? You mean that one? You mean the Obama that Black Lives Matter started under? That one? I don't want to hear it.
I wonder who. Okay, so I'm gonna have to read that later, but I did.
Yeah,
I did
we're at
Google that.
36 minutes. Sorry, my rant went over.
Oh, okay, well, that's okay. So I wanted to also just pull this up real quick, and then we're gonna close out. And I'm also gonna remind everybody that I am going to put these links. I'm going to put the Monica Lewinsky link in the description too. So this right here was just a clip here where they were talking about how the visitors to Clarence Thomas's pimp's house, Harlan's house, that's his pimp, and then how they felt deeply shaken by the Nazi memorabilia and Nazi uniform decorations at Harlan Crow. That's Thomas's pimp. So this is in Mother Jones.
Yeah, let's
so,
talk about the deep roots of Nazism. Okay, let's talk about Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush is Daddy Bush, is grandfather Bush. Okay, he was George Bush the first's father. He was Senator Bush at that time. Let's remember that he never met a Nazi he didn't love. Okay, let's remember that Prescott Bush is the reason why the Senate, he was censored by the Senate for continuing to. Okay, so they had to pass a law forbidding Americans from trading with the Nazis. This is after the declaration of war. They still had to pass a law. Why? Because Prescott Bush would not stop being a fucking Nazi. And I don't mean that in a figurative term.
What about the Nazi Party in New York? Was he part of that?
Oh, I don't know if he was officially a part of it. Probably not. I mean, he was a politician, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. But they shot all those down during the war. They put all those guys into intern camps. The Japanese were not the only ones put into intern camps. Germans and Italians were also put into intern camps. Not just Japanese. It was primarily Japanese, but Germans and Italians as well. And so if you were part of the Nazi Party of America, you probably were arrested and put into internment camps.
So that was after that big like parade or whatever they had, right? Because they had
there were no Nazi parades during the war, were there?
Yeah, there was one. It was in New York. Let me
I didn't
go
know
ahead
that.
and finish what you're saying. I'll look it up. But yeah.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I can't believe it was after the war because most of them went real silent once the declaration of war happened. Nazi parties got real quiet because again, some of them were put into internment camps. But after the war, Prescott Bush made $1.5 million being a money launderer for the Nazis. He created a dummy corporation in the Netherlands and laundered money directly into Wall Street. And how was this discovered? This was discovered by the Holocaust Museum, where? In Florida. When? Prior to 2000, during George Bush's first run. I can't make this shit up. I was listening to this interview live on the radio. The director of the Holocaust Museum in Miami, Florida, said, I wasn't purposely looking for a Bush connection. I was given a research project. People asked, how did the Nazis get so much of their wealth out of Germany afterwards? Because it was illegal. So he said, I did a research project. I followed the money. I traced it backwards. I found Prescott Bush and this dummy corporation in the Netherlands, and he made he became a millionaire through it. And then he casually says, but I was asked to hold on to this story for a few months. He didn't release it until after the election. Had that come out before the election, that the Bushes are nothing but a bunch of fucking Nazis. Okay. So anyway, when was this? German America?
So
this is I know about this. This is 1939. This is 2 years before the war. So I know that there were open Nazi parties. I don't doubt that. That's why I was saying that Nazis were out on the open at this time. That there was an openly, there were lots of actual American Nazis. Yeah, I know. But once 1941 happened, they went real quiet. So yeah, no, I know about the stuff in the 30s. Yeah, it was very popular in America. Okay, now let me tell you, Ford. Okay, Henry Ford loved Hitler. He brought Hitler over on a national tour, and it was Henry Ford that handed Hitler the protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is a fraud based on a hoax derived from a parody. Okay, I mean, this is the most intellectually fraudulent document ever. It still circulates highly in white supremacist circles. Okay, the protocols of the Elders of Zion is this. Like I said, it's a hoax based on a fraud, based on a satire. About how Jews want to control the world. It originally was about how Catholics want to control the world.
Elon Musk let that go up. They were posting that on Twitter.
And then the new version of that, the later version was communists, right? Today it's liberals, right? But always it just means Jew/Catholic. But again, yesterday's Catholic is today's Jew. Anyway. But eugenics, okay, the science of eugenics was an American science. Okay, it was practiced in America. Okay, Hitler's inspiration was the United States. He said they exterminated people. No one ever talks about that.
Same as Jim Crow.
He's like it's not going to matter. All we have to do is win the war. No one's going to give a shit that we exterminated our Jews. They all do the same shit.
The same with they even commented that the Jim Crow era in the United States, although they got their inspiration from that system. They said that even the Jim Crow era was too brutal, but they were inspired by it.
Really?
Yeah,
The
Nazis
Nazis said it
were.
was
Oh
too
yeah,
brutal.
they
Yeah, that's
said it was
amazing
too
because
brutal.
okay, that's good. That's good. That's a good fact because there's a guy. His name is Andrew something.
Mhm.
He recently wrote a book about fascism. He's one of the kind of premier public scholars that works on fascism as a devoted topic. Now, I realize every conservative listening to me right now, by definition, doesn't understand what fascism is because they just don't know the facts. They're certain that fascism just means totalitarianism, which it doesn't. They mix up the word fascism with authoritarianism, and they think it's a left-wing thing. They think it has to do with communists.
Mhm.
Fascism has to do with the opposite side of the spectrum from communism, which is fascism. Fascism is ultra conservatism. Okay, authoritarian communism, yeah, it looks like fascism because it's authoritarian and it's totalitarian, but it is definitionally wrong to think that it's fascist. It's authoritarian. Now they don't know what those words mean, but again, they're immune to facts, and even when presented with them, they don't want to know. But technically, fascism is literally only an invention of the 20th century by Mussolini. He invented fascism. Now, that's the facts. Okay. Now, the expert on fascism, when asked, well, what do you think is a predecessor to the best example of fascism, its predecessor, and he said it was the KKK. So it vibes with what you're saying. So even before fascism existed, Americans were already fascist. That's how far right wing our white population is. And so when they feel uncomfortable and feel like crying because they feel excluded, they need to confront the fact that their inbred ancestors were also ultra fascist racists. Okay. And if they think that we feel bad for them because they're going to shed a tear to think how shameful their past is, that's not my fucking problem.
Nope, not at all. Not gonna get it from me. Nope. I have no empathy. I mean, you know what I'm
Go
saying?
get
Like
some therapy and go cry to them. Okay. But it's not our problem
exactly.
that you come from despicable people and you choose to extend their legacy instead of fighting it. If you fought it, I would work with you. If you want to be an ally to the descendants of the victims of your despicable, shameful, cowardly ancestors, then I'll side with you. But if you cannot do that, don't be surprised when the revolution comes and you are trampled underneath. So that's why when you see these people so scared and paranoid about things like BLM, they call them riots. It just makes me wonder, what kind of piece of shit are you that you can't hit the streets? I know tons of white people that hit the streets during BLM. Tons of white people. How come they can go there and not be afraid and be a part of the protest? And why do you see it as an existential threat? You must be one of the enemy. Do you see what I mean? Why would they feel afraid of BLM?
The only reason they were able to do that was because of the outside agitators, which of course now everybody knows, but the news of that came out too late, where, like you said, they are immune to facts. They don't care that it was undercover cops that infiltrated the protest to make it look bad, like they broke windows and started fires and things like that to make it look bad.
Some of it was agent provocateurs, but not exclusively. There were plenty of actual anarchists that like to burn shit, and I agree with it. I think you should burn shit. I think everyone should burn shit. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you want to go into that, we can do a thing on public, whatever they call it, public vandalism or whatever. It gets headlines. We talk about it. So I guess it worked.
Right.
Property destruction works. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you feel bad that stores got burned and windows got smashed. But we're talking about it. If you those who make justice impossible make violent revolution inevitable. So it's not like they're going to listen to us if we don't break shit. So let's break shit.
Right.
Let's break shit so much it shuts down. I know. It shuts down the whole society. I say we do it. I say we destroy more stuff. So I'm sorry. It works. It's a good tactic. I'm not going to dismiss it and say it was nothing but police infiltrators. Yeah, some of it was. Okay, but not exclusively.
But what I was trying to correct
No, go ahead.
So I was trying to correct it to say, yes, that some of the people joined in later, but the initial start of those protest, of those fires and the disruption was not started by the protesters that were peaceful, that were rightfully.
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe not. I'm not gonna throw those people under the bus. I think they're justified in burning shit, and I think they should burn shit. So I don't have a problem with it.
Now
I think they should burn more shit. I think they should have went straight to the police station and burned the police station.
I think they did that. Well, no, it was a Capitol.
Yeah, here in Hollywood, they burned a police car. They should have burned more.
The Capitol here in Nashville, like back during Black Lives Matter, it was like some guy, but it turned out that he was a Trumper though.
See, See what I mean? So yeah,
Yeah,
you're
he's
right that a
trouble.
lot of this. Look, that always happens. That you have. They're called the agent provocateur. That's a
Mhm.
technical term for that always happens. They've gotten caught a number of times. In Seattle, they had peace groups where, during the Bush era where it was infiltrated by a motorcycle cop, a highway policeman.
Mhm.
And it's like he was like blonde, blue eyes, big and built with a buzz cut. Like who would believe he's a hippie protester? But they were like, yeah, there was this weird guy. He kept coming in saying he wanted to bomb shit. And everyone thought he was really weird. And then one day he got an award from the police association and he got outed. And they were like, there's all these agent provocateurs.
Right. So what did he got an award? What was it for exactly?
Oh, just his regular service. It was a mundane thing, but it
Uh-huh.
accidentally became public. It was the same thing that happened with if you see the Goodfellas, the movie with Donnie Brasco, where they used the same FBI boat for a different
Uh-huh.
sting. And so they wanted to make sure that the mafia didn't see that newspaper article because they were using the same. So it's just sometimes that happens.
Okay, so this was a good show, and we're gonna just end right now. We let us know in the comments if you enjoyed this programming, if y'all have any questions, if you would like to be a guest on the show with us, or if there's anything in particular you'd like us to talk about. Also, we have another site that I got that's cheaper merchandise here. There's the QR code, so you can just scan that, and that's the purple shirt. You can pick whatever color. They got other colors. I just have that purple shirt. And the mugs. I actually got a mug today. That's a nice little mug. And then we have the recycled tote for the hippies. Everybody not using plastic bags anymore. So support, follow, subscribe, and share. Help boost our page. And thank you, Charles. And we will see you on the next one.